episode of the Sales Syndicate Podcast. I've honestly lost track of what episode we're on now. The pipeline's looking good, which is a champagne problem for sure. I get a lot of stick in the business for complaining about how busy my diaries is for podcast recordings at the minute. But super excited for my guest today. So I will hand over to Luke to introduce himself and the company before we jump into the topic. So over to you, Luke.
Perfect. And thank you for having me, Jamie. Really, really appreciate it. Yeah, my name's Luke Willett. I'm an account exec at Virti. I guess a very brief intro to Virti. We are an immersive training platform. What that really means is we allow organizations to create training content that would essentially allow their employees to put themselves into kind of difficult, risky, hard to reproduce, hard to scale training environments using technologies like virtual reality, AI assisted avatars that you can speak to, that kind of thing. Quite an emerging market, very, very interesting. We're a smallish business that are on our scale up journey, if you like. So yeah, very good. Previous to that, I've been at kind of other smaller ed tech startups, but started my sales career at IBM, so Big Blue, where I did sort of 4 years in sales and started my sales journey, which is a very different world to where I am today. But I still carry a lot of love in my heart for IBM. So yeah, happy to be here today. Thank you for having me on.
Amazing. Just for context, what's your current position at Virti?
So I'm an account exec, so it's sales. I really wish there was a different term for it, because it doesn't really sum up the sort of scale, I guess, of things that I cover. I'm one of two account execs here at Virti, and we do everything from obviously all of the classic kind of prospecting, taking people through the sales cycle of discovery calls and demos and closing contracts and all that type of thing. But being a small business, I also have to get involved in stuff before it even gets into the pipeline. So bits of marketing. We currently don't have a marketing team in house, so I get involved with bits of that. And equally at the other end of the scale, do lots of kind of like customer success stuff as well. So account management bits with working on renewals, helping customers get the most value out of the platform, and also trying to build a channel model as well. So alongside kind of doing our own prospecting, trying to build a channel model that helps us kind of grow the company further. So yeah, a very interesting role, kind of lots of touch points. Got to be very conscious of where I spend time, what gets the most value out of it. But it's I wouldn't have it any other way, right? Having particularly come from a big organization where essentially you're a bit of a cog in a machine, and you have one specific job to fulfill, and you're sort of live or die by the number. This is great because you kind of get a bit of everything, and it's a very interesting challenge for sure.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more on the cog in the machine. And I'm exactly the same. I came from two larger, FTSE companies in the UK, and you just felt like however much work you were doing, it didn't really contribute to the bigger picture. Whereas when you're involved in, a little bit of everything, and there's the headcount's a lot less, you do see a direct output of what you're inputting, top of funnel, whatever you want to call it. So it's extremely rewarding. It's extremely difficult as well. But it was a good bit of context there, because that actually leads us really nicely into what we're going to talk about today, which is we sort of labeled as full lifecycle sales, which is AKA like the reality of sales as a startup. And what we mean by full lifecycle is basically what you've just explained there. So that's a perfect little intro. But yeah, I think we've got a nice little sort of chronological list of how we're going to run through things from that, what we mean by that full sort of life cycle and sales. And I think we'll focus on the sales side of things first. And I know you've touched on a bit of involvement in other areas of the business, but I think naturally let's start in the sales side of things first. So from that life cycle funnel, whatever you want to call it, give us a bit of an insight into the reality of prospecting and business development in the world of an AE that doesn't necessarily have support of SDRs and heads of and things.
Yeah, Yeah, and it is certainly a challenge. And sort of like I said at the top, right, I have to be really conscious about where I spend my time and what's going to get the most value out of it. And I haven't always got this right, and I'm still, trying things out and not necessarily getting it right today. Um, I also think, where it's I don't know whether it's just being in a small business at the moment, or kind of more generally the world of, being an AE and business development is changing a bit, but kind of cold outreach is something that is hard, certainly at the moment. And spending a lot of time doing that, doesn't necessarily bring in the kind of value I need in terms of filling my pipeline, but also closing deals. So, um, you know, spend a lot of time thinking about, well, how can I automate some of that to save me some time, but also, not automating it to the point where it's just kind of like, guff going out there and kind of, needless cold emails, which, just actually annoy people and can be bad for your brand and don't really help. I think in thinking about the actual like prospecting bit and what we do there and where we see most value, we've had an enormous amount of success from things like events, and that is where some of our biggest deals certainly have come, because you're meeting the buyer where they are, right? They're kind of coming to the event often with intent to buy. But again, has its own challenges, right? We're a small business with not a huge amount of kind of cash to spend on these kind of things, and they are very expensive. So we've been very picky about what events we do go to, and when we do go to them, we do them well, right? So prep beforehand, making sure that we're reaching out to people prior to the event, see if they're going, seeing if there's kind of intent there, and where possible, trying to set meetings up for yourself at the event so that you can kind of make the most of your time. So events have certainly been very, very interesting. Then we've dabbled in the past with things like using external resources to help us drive leads, with mixed results. I think external lead generation organizations certainly serve a purpose. I think our biggest learning from that probably has been around, you really have to spend time at the start like educating them and sort of almost coaching them on how to sell your product. Quite often, they are maybe working with 4 or 5 other different accounts all at the same time. So, making it as easy as possible for them, giving them as much kind of collateral that they can use as part of their outreach, and regularly reviewing that with them, right? Testing things out, seeing how that works, maybe doubling down on a particular industry or a role type or whatever it may be, and being hyper focused. It does work eventually, but can take some time, and you do have to find the right partner to help you with that. But then also, I guess, then the kind of final point is, on my own outreach and my own kind of prospecting, it is, as I said, looking at things like automation, but, also trialing lots of things out, whether that be, we've just done some pieces around kind of web intent data, so where people are coming to our website, and how can then we nurture those type of people, and the stuff that kind of Selligence do as well around sales intent information. How do you use that information with automation to then actually capitalize on the people that have intent to buy and are in the market to get your product. And we're still trialing those things. One of the kind of blessings and a curse, I guess, of the product that I sell is that we can kind of be almost everything to anyone. And whilst we're kind of trying to like target specific industries, actually, learning and development, who's typically the role type we go after, sits within every organization. So it can be quite hard to kind of narrow that down. But the big thing, I guess, really is testing and trying different things out, experimenting, failing fast. If things don't look like they're kind of working, then let's move on. Let's try something else, and see what we get from that. So, yeah, I guess those are kind of the key areas from a prospecting aspect that we try and target.
Yeah, so some interesting points there. I think you were talking about automation and your stance on the fact that automation, whilst it's great, you can sometimes forget the personal or personalization and the like relevancy side of reaching out. I think I've seen I mean, in the world of ChatGPT and
Yeah.
Zapier or Zapier, whatever you call it, people are building these automation systems themselves using Google Sheets and things, and they're able to pull triggering events is what we call them, but something happening in the business world essentially. And then they're able to push that to a contact data enrichment and then push that into Apollo or whatever, an email tool. But the issue with that is great, you're automating things, but like you said, it's that mass outreach approach. I probably get 5 to 10 of them a day, and I unsubscribe and delete every single one because, they're trying to tell me that they understand my problems, but they've never spoken to me, and it just doesn't sort of ring true. So I think that's an interesting one, isn't it? Like you want to maintain that like personalization, personal approach, which is, I think, like when that led into the events, which is a great example of face-to-face interaction, that personalization. And it's interesting, actually, you're probably one of the only people who I've spoken to recently who has like a really good demonstrable ROI from events. If in terms of close one, because you can get loads of other stuff from it, but close one can be quite difficult at events, can't it?
Yeah. And I guess maybe that's, maybe it's the industry that we're in, and maybe that's pretty helpful. And we haven't always got events right. We've done things before where we've kind of turned up to events not prepped beforehand, not had a good execution plan when we're there, not thought about the, how do you take someone from just having a conversation to actually getting them into a demo, a discovery, or whatever it may be post event. And we've learned a lot from kind of doing them, I guess. But we've found them super useful, and actually it's kind of maybe one of the ways in which automation can help. Some of the events that we go to will automate some of our outreach prior to the event to try and gauge some of that interest, and then when we see things like open rates on emails, then we can do more personalized outreach to say, look, hey, it looks like you might be coming to this event next week. Do you want to meet up at the event? I've got these times free, or whatever it may be. So yeah, the two can work really well together. But yeah, we've certainly found them very useful.
Yeah, I think the last point you sort of touched on was the testing out things, test and learn, just iterate and basically double down on what's working well, whether that's intent or sales triggers, pre-intent, whatever you want to call it. And I think it's that's an interesting one, because I think when the head count is lower, it can help focus your resources, focus your time on low hanging fruit, or the opportunities that may be warmer, or further down the loose funnel. So talking about that funnel pipeline then. So prospecting and BD, pipeline management, what does that look like when we're talking about the reality for you in terms of doing most of it yourself, if not all of it?
Yeah, do you mean in terms of managing like opportunities through the pipeline?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that probably is something that I focus on every single day. The nice thing about being in a small business is that I see not only the effort but the cost in even getting an opportunity to that phase, right? The effort that goes into marketing and creating demand in the market, the prospecting and BD that goes with that, to then actually getting someone into the state where they're kind of ready to go for a POC, is an enormous amount of effort and cost. So what's great about that is that when I do have opportunities that are in my pipeline, I really take care of them, because I know what it's taken to even get them in that state. And I try and spend a little bit of my time every single day looking at my pipeline and thinking, what have I got next steps booked in? Where's this? What have we got coming down the line in the next few weeks for this prospect? Particularly, those at the kind of latter end of the funnel as well. It's very easy, with the market that we're in and what I sell, with it being kind of virtual reality, people get very excited by the tech. So, POCs and stuff like that are always great, and people get very excited by it and stuff. But then actually converting that into a full contract is kind of critical. So again, planning ahead and really thinking about what do we need to do to be able to get that to get that full contract after the POC is really important. I think on that particular point as well, one of the things that we introduced probably about six months ago was like a project charter. And way before I was in sales, I was a project manager, and it's some of the techniques that we've used as a project manager I've sort of introduced into the sales cycle. So when we get a customer who wants to go through a POC, we basically set up a project charter which maps everything from the the goals and objectives of what the POC is, through to the roles and responsibilities, the risks and dependencies as part of doing that, and obviously a project timeline. It's a bit like we set up front contracts in a discovery call where we say to the client, this is what we're going to do, and if we can show you this value, then you'll go for a contract. We're actually just documenting that, right? And we're actually getting the client to be involved in that process, and we're showing them what that would look like and how we get there and how we achieve it, and ultimately the work that's involved from them as well. And so we can have full transparency, but that's been really effective, and since we've introduced that, we've had like every single one of our POCs has converted so far. So I think that's been a really useful tool for anybody that uses kind of proof of concepts as part of their sales cycle.
Well, it's interesting actually, because we've got an episode coming up in a few weeks where we're actually talking about how sales professionals today almost need to be project managers or like operational managers. And I guess what the person I was speaking with meant was that there's some of the skill sets that you've basically just described for us there, of like pipeline management. It's essentially project management of key stages and a Gantt chart, mutual action plans or whatever. And it's often the people who are most organized with that side of things that have the shortest deal cycles with the highest conversion rates. And in terms of like, I don't know, happy customers or, prospects who say, that was really well managed, sort of deal process for us. So, and the second point I was going to say is you'll have to share an example of that with us, like that blank sort of like, plan. I think that could be really good because for anyone listening, we do typically turn these into a AI written blog as well, so we can try and do like a blank version of that in the blog, which I think would be really good. And I can also share it with our head of sales who can have a look at it as well. Have you guys heard of Trumpet?
I've not, no.
So Trumpet's really, really good to play into that like project management style. So they're called like microsites. Like essentially you create a pod inside of Trumpet, and it's every communication for that process goes through there, but it has that like project management style timeline in it, which it made me think of that. And we've been testing that, and it's been brilliant for exactly what you said there. So that could be an interesting one for you and the listeners to check out as well. But super interesting that it aligns with what we're hearing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that kind of like I guess the key thing with all of those tools, whether you just do it like us on a simple Google Doc or whether you use Trumpet, or I know there's other kind of tools that you can use out there as well. It's really the transparency piece, I think, and being really clear up front about what the goals and objectives are of this piece, and then tracking those on a regular basis. It's something that also, going back to the kind of prospecting BD piece, I've been trying to include a lot more in really upfront in my like kind of discovery calls, is being transparent, with even things like the medic process and what it is that I need to understand about the customer and what they're trying to achieve in order to navigate them through the whole kind of sales cycle. I was actually talking to a sales colleague the other day who was saying they literally take a prospect through the medic process in terms of they help me understand all of these points. For me that feels a bit extreme. It's a bit kind of like it becomes then all about the salesperson and what it is that they want as part of this. But I do think there's a balance there where you can use something like a medic or medpic and convert that into how that helps the prospect assess whether our tool is right for them, and filling in those bits. I think certainly is it's just the transparency piece, right? It's being really clear about what it takes to be able to assess our products and whether it's going to help you solve your challenges today.
And that medic or medpic thing you were talking about, is that the project management tactic strategy that you were speaking about previously?
No, it's more of a sales formula, I guess. So, when I started at IBM, it was kind of BANT is what we were taught. So when you're
Right, yeah.
speaking to a project, you get budget, authority, need, and time. Those are the things that we need to understand in terms of qualifying a deal. Medic or MEDPIC is another one that people use. It's I guess a bit more kind of modern in its approach, but it's the same sort of thing, right? You're just trying to identify, the kind of the reasons why people are buying, who's the economic buyer, who signs off, what's the process for sign off, all those types of things, and you can dress them up in a nice way that kind of helps the prospect understand why that's important to be able to kind of progress and move forward.
Is it another acronym for is like this? The M stands something. I'm putting you on the spot now, aren't it?
Yeah, exactly. To reel them all off, I'm terrible with memory and things like that. Luckily, in our HubSpot, we kind of like document them all down. But yes, it's an acronym, exactly that. Yeah. So it started off as Medic, and then it grew to kind of MEDPIC, maybe a few years ago. I'm not sure, but yeah, if you just Google Medic, MEDDIC, maybe another C at the end. Yeah, people will find it out there for sure.
Cool. All right, brilliant. Okay, so the next one we've got on the list in terms of that chronological order we were speaking about at the start is account management. We've got partner management and account management, but I think we'll do account management first because that feels like a bit more of a natural linear journey. So when we're talking about account management, obviously post deal close, post close one, so account management and customer success, which you said like you said at the start, you've got involvement in that because of the startup scale up world. So what is your involvement in that day to day?
Yeah, so it very much certainly at the stage, again, we've kind of from a recruitment aspect only just started to hire kind of our first customer client success managers, which are coming in now. But prior to that, it was very much still me as an AE. Any account that I won, I would maintain ownership of it, and my job was to help them onboard them onto the platform, get them going in terms of seeing the value and return on investment, all the way through to then in a year, 2 years time doing the renewals. So heavily involved in maintaining. When I first kind of picked that up and had to do that, I was a bit kind of like, oh, this seems like the fun bit's gone now, right? As a salesperson, I love the kind of process and of helping clients understand their challenges and showing them how we can help them and winning and bring them on board. And I was always a bit like, oh, the kind of like after bit didn't seem that exciting. But my opinion of it has massively changed, and I see as much value and enjoyment in maintaining the relationship as I do winning the customer. And particularly, maybe it's because I just love working in small businesses like this, and again, I know the effort and cost that's gone into winning a customer, but getting a renewal for me is now almost more exciting than winning a new customer, because it massively demonstrates that our product brings value, and that we as a business have managed to help the client achieve something. So yeah, it's been really exciting. That it's an enormously important thing for a business of our size to get a renewal from a customer. It shows that we've got product market fit, and it shows that it helps us indicate industries perhaps that we are doing well in, that we're succeeding as well. So a lot of insight from getting renewals and a lot of excitement. It comes with its challenges. It can be very time consuming, and I think that's the other piece that, again, I've kind of learned from failures of getting too sucked into a particular project and not knowing when to bring other people, whether that be kind of developers or product people, in to help me manage it as well. But I think over time I've sort of managed to find a balance now of knowing, right, that's a very quick thing that I can solve for a customer who's got a particular problem, versus this actually needs a bit of time and effort, and the customer needs some love. Why don't we bring someone from engineering or one of the product guys in to come and help figure that bit out, and my time's better spent doing prospecting or whatever it may be. So it is, like I said, an incredibly rewarding part of the job, as well as winning new business.
Yeah, we had we've had a couple of episodes where we've sort of spoken with people who've been in sales and CS, or the other way around, and they, in today's world, retention is the strongest form of revenue, right? Well, most reliable form of revenue.
Yeah,
Like you said about the cost of acquisition being so high and things.
yeah,
And I think, it's the conversations that we had previously is that some companies do actually maintain the sales through to CS relationship for like a period of time of like, I don't know, 3 to 6 months. But I actually think it encourages better sales processes and better behaviors, doesn't it? And sort
yeah,
of culture in a business, because you're not just like, oh, amazing, 10 grand, fantastic, not quite an ICP fit, but commission, baby, let's go.
yeah,
And it's
yeah,
more, it's more like, right, is this going to bite me in the ass with the person who sits, a few seats down if you're in the office, and is it going to be a bit awkward when they're like,
yeah.
what on earth is this forklift driver doing with our SaaS tool? Like, which you've heard stories about before. So I think it does, like, it's actually a massive benefit to have that like synergy or whatever between the teams.
Yeah, definitely. And I notice it now coming up on things like my discovery calls as well, right? I'll be asking questions that I know further down the line when we've kind of onboarded them and that they might be a potential problem. I can bring that to the forefront to help qualify whether actually this is a valuable prospect. So yeah, it's massively impactful. And I think that approach to, right, salespeople, it's not like, you don't just hand over to CS and that's it. Actually, you're part of the process. You're part of the team that go and onboard the client or whatever it may be. Yeah, I think that's a really positive move for everyone involved, for sure.
Now we've sort of touched on upsell, cross sells, and renewals. And I guess for you, like you said, that's as valuable, if not more valuable, than a new sale, because, like you said, they've had the product for a year or two, so they've seen. Let's be honest, they've seen the bad bits as well, or the bits that aren't quite as good as they might have hoped during the deal process. That's just natural.
Yeah.
But in terms of that upsell, cross sell, renewals, do you treat that as, obviously it's not necessarily going to be in the same pipeline, but do you almost treat that kind of in a similar way as you would, obviously slightly different nuances and things, but do you treat
Yeah.
that with as much attention and as much care and thought and attitude as you would with the new deals?
Yeah, for sure. And those project charters I talked about that we run for a POC, we'll also then start a new one when they onboard as a client. Because it may be that there's slightly different objectives. Having done the POC, they might realize different things, different benefits. There's a scale conversation, whatever it may be. So yeah, we almost restart again with that kind of project charter document as approach, and then set up sort of regular, whether that be quarterly business reviews, monthly, whatever the client wants in terms of reviewing those. But yeah, I think, like I was sort of saying, there's a balance that I don't always get right, but I'm getting better at it in terms of my involvement in that and knowing which bits to dive in and out to. But yeah, certainly from a pipeline management aspect, I look at that just as much as I do my new business pipeline. Particularly with renewals and things, like quite often we're certainly finding that after a POC, clients will maybe sign up for a year rather than necessarily a 2 or 3. We get some who will go straight for a multi-year, but tend to come on for a year and then they maybe go for a multi-year contract after that. So a year goes quickly in SaaS sales. So if you're not focused on that in terms of that, right, well, in 12 months time, there's a bigger opportunity here for a multi-year contract. If you're not focused on that, every week, then that will come around quickly and bite you in the butt. So yeah, I definitely look at that almost as much as I do my new business pipeline.
Yeah, no, like you said, the multi-year deals are so much more difficult to come by nowadays because buyers are just so educated and so savvy with. It's almost like when you think back to the days of before they brought in that car insurance FCA regulation where everything had to be the same price as existing customers, etc. But it used to be the days of like my background was insurance, and every year you'd be like, right, I'll just check on compare the market, see what deal I can get, and then I'll say,
Yeah.
oh well, I'll just threaten to leave if you don't drop your pants on price. And it's almost like customers have that attitude with
Yeah.
SaaS, don't they, where they go,
Yeah.
right, well, are there any good new competitors? Are they cheaper? Can I just threaten to leave, or could I just leave and onboard somewhere else? And it's so difficult nowadays to get those multi-year deals, and like you said, it's almost more challenging to get the renewals
Yeah.
as well. So I can see that would be like more rewarding in a sense.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and again, it's almost kind of the same for a small startup like ours. If we do get a customer that has come through the whole process of a POC, into maybe they try something out for a year first, and then they go for a multi-year contract. It's an enormous indicator, I guess, that actually we're doing the right things. Types here, the value that we're providing this prospect is good, and then it's an indicator for us to, right, do we double down on that as an industry? Do we, whatever it may be? So yeah, it's hugely important. Yeah.
Okay, the next one we've got on the list is partner management. So do you want to sort of explain what you mean by partner management in the context of obviously your company, your structure, and then how that's impacts your day to day as an AE?
Yeah, I guess it's for us what that really means. It can be a number of things. So we're in the world of training, right? Just to keep this kind of simple. And what the platform does is it allows our end customers to build their own training. Sometimes they don't have the capabilities to do that, or sometimes they don't have the inclination to do that. So they can use a third party to build the content for them. So we have like a part of our kind of sales function, if you like, who are people that build training content on behalf of clients. Similarly, not to kind of confuse it further, those people could also act as resellers for us, and they can go out there themselves. They can build content for clients, and then use our platform to basically distribute that training content. So they're essentially sort of reselling licenses to our platform. So we have sort of like two different types of partners: people that we bring in as kind of third-party content creators, and then people that build content and resell our licenses. So as part of my role of also kind of doing sort of partner management is sometimes finding those people, but more often than not they kind of come to us, and it's managing the relationships, ensuring that they, particularly if they're reselling us, ensuring that they fully they're reselling us in the right way. They're pitching the product in the right kind of way, they're using the product in the right kind of way, getting the most value out of it, which can be complex. And I think when I was reflecting before our call, that the biggest thing we've learned in terms of managing partners is to fail fast with them. They can be a real time suck, and they can be you can feel like you're getting somewhere and you're spending time trying to educate them and bring them on board, for them to then actually really not fully understand your product, and ultimately it never really goes anywhere. So I qualify them very hard very early on, and we put things in place as well to protect us a little bit. We, like we do with prospects, in terms of we run a POC often before they go to a full contract. We'll do similar things with partners. So we will say, look, why don't you build some test content for us, and we can pay you for it if that's what needs to be done. But then we'll see how they get on with that, and use that as a reusable asset as well if we need to as well. But we'll test their capabilities and whether they fully understand how to get use the product. And if they don't live up to that, then ultimately we walk away from it, because it's just not worth our time and effort. So yeah, I think from the partner management kind of things, it is one of those things where I will spend the least amount of time doing it, but when I'm doing it, I'm qualifying very hard, and then the ones that are good, we kind of make sure they get as much attention and love as we can give to them in the short time that we've got left.
Yeah, it's one of the first episodes we recorded actually for the podcast, probably 6 odd months ago. We spoke to a guy who works in partnerships, or specialised in partnerships, and he kind of said a similar thing of like the failing fast, and the majority of partnerships will fail because of a certain set of criteria or whatever. But it's one of those things that they're very, very difficult to get right, but when you do get right, they can be extremely fruitful in terms of the revenue or the payout. But
Yeah.
it's I guess it's a weird one, like you said, you spend the least amount of time because you ultimately you are still an AE, not a partnerships manager.
Yeah.
So it can be. Would you say for you as well? That's probably the one of the less enjoyable parts of the full cycle.
If I had the time, I think it could be really interesting. In when I was at IBM as well, the part of IBM that I was in, 98% of the business was through channel models, so through resellers. So again, I learned there about the kind of like failing fast and spending time with the ones that do get it and do bring in the value. And it was good. It was really interesting, and you actually build up some amazing relationships because you can kind of like we're on the same team. Like we can help each other. There's lots of kind of mutual rewards. You're spreading the load of when it comes to things like demos and discovery, and you can like it's almost having like an extra pair of hands or an extra brain to help you with deals. So I think it if I had more time, it would be a really interesting part of the job to kind of get involved with. But when you're trying to do the rest of the kind of like sales cycle, it becomes something that this can be really good and really beneficial, and is like an additional revenue stream, but it's got to be done right and got to be very carefully managed in terms of time.
For sure. And in terms of those other parts of the cycle that we were just talking about there, the last one for us to cover is you've already mentioned right at the start, which was marketing involvement and sort of broader strategy. So, pre things coming into your pipeline, let's ideally inbound. That's great. We love inbound leads, but all that brand awareness and strategy and stuff, like what sort of involvement do you have from the nitty gritty of marketing and strategy?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting one, and I think as we touched on right at the start, that I feel certainly like the world of prospecting as an AE is changing. It's so noisy out there now. It's so hard to talk to the right people. People's inboxes are full of very similar emails written in the same ways. LinkedIn's full of salespeople sharing their tips and thoughts, which is great, but it what boils down to is everybody sending very similar emails. And mobile numbers are becoming harder to get hold of. And I actually think it would be interesting to see over the next kind of 12 months. My time is almost better spent on helping marketing create more demand in the market and targeting the right people who are ultimately kind of in a buying, or have some intent to buy. So yeah, I've been certainly in the last 6 months been spending more of my time doing that. As I sort of said, we currently don't have an in-house marketing team, although we are hiring for a head of marketing. So if there's anybody here listening who wants to get involved, please reach out.
Yeah, how much you paying?
For you, anything, my friend, anything. Yeah. You name a price. But what we have had a little bit of external help from actually via our investors on like 1 day a month kind of basis, someone who can come and help us implement the kind of nitty gritty bits around whether that's paid ads or doing some SEO stuff, or we right at the start of the year we did like we ran a survey, but because they're not ingrained in the business, they don't necessarily always know the messaging. They don't necessarily know who to target. So I've had to work pretty closely with them on that piece. They have some great ideas in terms of whether it's running a survey or webinars or like events, like I said, as well as things like we did a little bit of sending out like flyers and stuff to very targeted ICP contacts. But I've had to help with the messaging and getting that right. And I think it's probably that's almost worth more of my time right now than me setting up a sequence that sends a bunch of cold emails out to a random group of 1,000 contacts to maybe get a 1% reply rate or whatever it may be. I think trying to create the demand people, and then being a bit smart about looking at intent data, whether that be people then coming to the website, sales intent stuff, whatever it may be, is trying to map all those pieces together and actually target the people at the right time who are ready to buy. So that's been a really interesting thing to get involved with over the last sort of 6 to 12 months as well.
Yeah, it's definitely one that's close to my heart, or whatever you want to call it. I sit next to sales. Obviously, it's a startup, right? There's not many of you anyway, but I sit next to sales, and we like to see it as more of a revenue generating function that has marketing and sales as part of it. So I completely agree with what you're saying there. Like, if marketing and sales have a direct, open communication, and it's back and forth. We had Laura Erdem on from Dream Data, who again, their sales and marketing sit in on sales pipeline reviews, and sales always feedback to marketing about what's working well and what's not, and what customers are asking and things. And it's that I guess holistic, probably the best word for it, that like holistic approach to mapping out your strategy and the best way to create demand. And like this podcast, it's a sales podcast, but it's executed by marketing, and it's like that ping pong, that tag team relationship. So for anyone who doesn't have a very not very good relationship with marketing, but doesn't have a very day-to-day good, deep sort of working relationship with marketing, definitely go and invest some time in building those relationships, because it's only going to help you with your, like you said, with your pipeline, collateral, all things like that. But it works both ways.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. And I think you're right. I didn't really mention it, but me feeding back into marketing is equally beneficial to them in terms of where they spend their time as well, and not kind of wasting it on areas that ultimately aren't gonna make any returns. I have worked in companies in the past where there has been a big line between sales and marketing, and it's always been about like, there's not enough MQLs coming through, which means, we're not getting enough discovery calls booked and all that type of thing. And that's just not the world. Certainly in a small business like ours, it's just not the world that we live in. And I don't think it's the world, in other companies as well. I certainly don't think it's that beneficial.
I think if you're from the marketing side of things, like if you want 1,000 crappy leads, I can get you 1,000 crappy leads. But ultimately, we're all fighting for that revenue to just be going in one direction, right? And as long as the revenue is going in that direction, you're obviously doing something right. And it's the quality, not quantity, cliche as well, of you'd rather 10, really, really good opportunities than 100 that are just bogging you down with all of these process and pipeline management things that are going to account to £40 deals, whatever it is. So it's definitely invest into that working relationship. And I think Laura was saying again, she was like, the best sales reps understand marketing and respect it, and the best marketers understand sales and respect the role. And that's that's so true. So if you know someone in marketing, go and speak to them. And as a marketer, if you know someone in sales, go and sit next to them, go and speak to them, because you'll be better for it.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. Yeah.
Right. So we've done the meat of it. So we now know the ins and outs of your day to day, and like that reality side of things. So I think in the last sort of 5 to 10 minutes, I think we'll try and share some sort of actionable advice and tips that people can take away. So we've got some questions for you. Hopefully not going to put you on the spot here, but if you were for a sales rep listening to this who's working in one of those bigger companies that we've both spoken about, perhaps slightly negatively, but it's not all negative, but what would be your advice you would give to a sales rep that's thinking, do I fancy a startup? Should I give it a go? What's the advice you'd give to that sales rep?
It's a good question, and I think that when I was in that situation, having maybe started my career in that, I made a lot of assumptions about what sales was, and I didn't realize how lucky I was in terms of being able to kind of like dine out on a brand name, right? And the fact that a name would always at least get me kind of foot in the door, or like someone would take my call, or I'd get a meeting because of it. And I think, you know, one of my biggest shocks to the system when I then moved to a small organization was how hard you have to work to be able to build trust and credibility, when people don't know your brand and people don't know who you are, right? And I think that builds a lot of resilience, because you're going to get a lot of no's, and it also it it I sort of touched on this earlier, but it makes you, you care a lot more about the calls that you then do get and the discovery, you know, demo booked meetings and all those types of things, because you realize the hard work that's gone into it. So I definitely say, like, you know, it's people that are thinking about the transition, it's a big graft, but in, not that you're not grafting today, but it's very eye-opening and very rewarding, right? It makes you look at sales in a completely different way when you realize that the cost and effort that goes into ever getting a prospect to your pipeline. So yeah, a different challenge for sure.
Yeah, it's a lot more rolling your sleeves up and getting in the dirt, but it's incredibly rewarding. And yeah, I'd agree with what you're saying there from a marketer's perspective who's done the same shift. If I had known what it's like from the get go, I would have been a lot less likely to take the role. But I'm very glad I did,
Yeah,
because it's yeah, you just can't compare the two. Like you finish a day and you feel a lot more. I don't know. You get a lot more like sense of reward out of
yeah.
your day to day, and you don't just feel like you're clocking in, clocking out. You feel like you're actually you're building something. You're going on a journey of some sort.
Yeah, 100%. I also, uh, I've worn several hats in my career so far, but I also did a stint as a developer, as a front-end web developer for about 12 months, just because I was having one of those existential, I don't know what to do with my life things.
Midlife crisis.
Yeah, totally. And it's very akin to that. Like, it was amazing to finish a day as a developer because you would see what you've built. Sometimes you then go and deploy that and it's on the web and you can see it. But even if you didn't and you were just kind of like working on something, you'd still get to the end of the day and you'd see what you'd done. And it's the same in this kind of like startup sales world. Is every day, you know, I get to the end of the day and I'd be like, right, okay, well, I've made progress with this particular lead and I've also done this with this prospect with this partner, and we've got a marketing campaign starting tomorrow and all these types of things. Yeah, it's very rewarding. Whereas, yeah, sometimes you can go weeks and weeks in a big organization, you know, not really making much progress. Yeah, and having to be very kind of patient and bide your time with it. So yeah, it's much
Yeah.
more rewarding. I totally agree.
But in summary, go and do it. Like, just
Yeah,
don't think about it. Go and do it. You'll be a better sales rep, better marketer, better CS manager, whatever. You'll be better for it, and
yeah,
you'll actually come out the other end more rounded. And when you stack up your CV or your experience against someone who's only ever done those big companies, it's incomparable. And if I was going to hire, I would always actually, when someone had done like 2 to 4 years or whatever at a startup, I'd be like, they're going to be very strong minded. They're going to be very like resilient in terms of
yeah,
like ups and downs as well.
agreed.
How you've talked a lot about things that are important to you in terms of as a company, like what you're all striving towards. But what are the given that you're involved in so many different things, are your key KPIs? Do you separate them out? Like, okay, I've got some CS KPIs, I've got renewals and stuff. It's got sales, and then I've also got stuff where I'm trying to help marketing. Do you look at all of it, or do you just focus on your KPIs for sales?
Yeah, I say at the moment we very much kind of like the sales thing is so important, just for the size of the business that we are and where we are in like our investment cycles, and you know we're hopefully getting some kind of more funding towards the end of the year. The most important thing for us at the moment is kind of the sales numbers, the sales figures. So, you know, like revenue and whether we're profitable and that kind of thing. So yeah, the focus for us at the moment very much is on those sales numbers. Having said that, you know, the renewal side of it is also really important to that story. So I'd probably say like secondary, is kind of some of the, you know, renewal figures. because they tell a brilliant story to investors as well, right? And then outside of that, yeah, that certainly at the moment, and this is why we're kind of heading, trying to get ahead of marketing, is the marketing stuff. We need a bit more time and effort and somebody to come in and help us manage that. But it's still very important for us as a business. But in my own personal targets, very much kind of like focused on revenue and my pipeline numbers, and then kind of like the renewals and what comes with it.
And good Q2 for you?
Could have been better. Look again in the kind of like size of business that we're in. Luckily, when at the moment we're not too driven by the quarters. Obviously, it is still important that we kind of like we use that as a way of keeping momentum and ensuring that deals don't just kind of like endlessly kind of go on. But for us, it's kind of at the moment the kind of full year revenue number is the most important one. Q2 was okay. Yeah, there was a deal that didn't quite get over the line. It's still going to happen, but it didn't quite come in when I wanted it to. But like I said, it's not a be all and end all for us right now.
Yeah, that's the harsh reality of sales, isn't it? But at least it's going to make Q3 dare I say easier, but no, the only reason I ask is because we speak to a lot of sales professionals, and I think Q2 seems to be a bit of a weird one, where Q1, like, people were really surprised, like Q1 was really good, like it felt like the year was off to a great start, and then Q2 seemed to just drop a little bit in terms of like general buzz, general like conversations and stuff, and it was just a bit more of a slog, and it kind of feels as if Q3 towards the end of Q2, from what we've heard and what we're seeing, is that Q3 looks like it's going to be more like Q1.
Yeah, and that's quite fair. It's not just me. Like I said, there's another AE here at Virti, and he's done a phenomenal job at landing a really big deal that's probably going to close in Q3. So yeah, that probably is a similar story, which is weird because I think Q3 is usually the one that I struggle with at the most because of holidays and that kind of thing. But I think we would say that's the same story at the moment.
Last question then. Podcast and nominate, something that we've been doing the last few episodes. So it's, who do we need to get on the podcast next? Who do you think could be a great guest? Or where can we go and find someone?
Yeah, I'm going to give a little bit of a shout out to a group that I'm part of. And this is also something I would urge anybody who's in a smaller startup to get involved with. It's a membership group called Sales Confidence, run by a guy called James Ski. You can go and find him on LinkedIn. And it's essentially, a network of AEs from a real range of businesses at different sizes, some, really well-known brands, others like me who people haven't heard of. But it's basically a support network, right? And one of the biggest things that I don't have compared to those big organizations we talked about earlier is the peers and the network to lean on when I've got questions or things aren't quite going my way. So it's a real great outlet for me to go and say, once a week to a bunch of people, I'm struggling with this particular problem. How would you deal with it? How would you overcome it? And the membership group, they do a range of different things. There's kind of weekly meetings, there's monthly coaching calls, there's private dinners that you can go and get involved with, and all those types of things. But I think in terms of a next guest, I would like to put it out to that group, because there's a real range of salespeople from different backgrounds. There's some phenomenal people on there who have been doing this very successfully for a long period of time. So I'm gonna suggest somebody from the Sales Confidence Network. Would be good to get on.
Yeah, ideal. We found that those micro communities, I think whatever you want to call them, whatever, they're great. For, like you said, it was a great piece of advice someone else shared actually on a recent episode of it's, don't have to be scared for asking for, like, don't be scared asking for help. Like, if you're a first time head of sales, or you're a new sales rep in a startup and you've never done startup before, don't be afraid to ask for help from people who have done that, or done it, been there and done that sort of thing. So great piece of advice to finish, and hopefully a good little community that we can sort of tap into for the podcast as well. So look, sure. We're just running over slightly, so apologies if you got a demo after this or whatever. But I really appreciate you coming on and sharing a sort of deep dive on the reality of like sales at a startup, because I think it is as we said, there's a lot of challenges and tribulations and things, but the benefits far outweigh the negatives. So I think it's been a really good honest like insight into things. So yeah, thanks for coming on.
No, thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
And obviously for those listening, please go and leave a review. I feel so cheap when I ask for that, but all the YouTubers do it, so I think I should do it. Yeah, please go and leave a review and hit the follow button. It's growing nicely, but yeah, we will see you in the next episode.